Yeah, thank you very much for the very kind introduction. I don't know how much of a real practitioner I am. I've been working in the field of circular economy for the past 6 years in the Netherlands, and of course, well, the Netherlands is quite advanced in what's happening with the circular economy. I wanted to spend a little bit of time really talking about a little bit about definitions of what circular economy is, but then also bringing it down to the ground with some practical examples. I thought, though, maybe it's just sort of a general note beforehand. You know, everybody's talking about shifting to the circular economy, accelerating the circular economy. You know, there's a certain level of abstraction that we're dealing with here. And also when we consider the way that our current economy operates, and even the sort of values and norms that people carry with them in their daily lives, when we talk about really shifting that model fundamentally, it's quite a big task, and it's not something that's really going to be happening over the next year or 5 years. It's something that I think everybody, I'm glad to see a lot of young people here. I think this is a challenge of our lifetimes. So this is something that I'm very interested to spend my career working on, and I'm hoping the same goes for you. Dealing with systems change, it's really important to take small steps, and that's actually something that a speaker, I think last night, Christian talked about. He works for a company called InnoBoost, heavily innovation focused, and I'm a real fan of his work, and also a lot of the sort of design thinking methodologies that go along with that. It's really all about actually kind of shifting your fundamental frame of mind about learning. It's not so much coming up with a brilliant idea and scaling it and being the next big thing, but actually kind of developing a process whereby you can really learn about people's values, about how the economy works right now and where there are very tough lock-ins, and chipping away very slowly to change that system. And as I said, it's not something that's going to be happening over the next year or 5, but really over a long period of time. But I think there are some important things that we can start with now. So without any further ado, we'll get into some examples. Maybe just quickly a word about my organization. It's called Circle Economy. I'm actually a member of the cities team. We work with cities, mostly with cities actually, but also bringing together businesses, really helping them sort of establish a vision and get really everybody on the same page, orientation, but also we try to give businesses and cities tools to really focus that vision down to really specific topics and intervention areas within that system to focus on. And by the end of the process that we go through with them, we really try to focus on implementation, so practical projects that we can really start. And again, it's all about small steps, and it's all about learning. I'm a little bit sick, so excuse my voice. So I think the circular economy is a new thing, and what we just heard previously was obviously the main connection is a focus on resource efficiency, and that's certainly part of it. But I think there is a point of convergence where all of these definitions come together, and actually this is one of the first tasks that we did as Circle Economy a few years ago, was trying to kind of condense what everybody's talking about into some key principles on what a circular economy is. So we looked at a number of organizations, really tried to map them, and see what everybody's talking about, and really try to kind of aggregate some key principles based on everybody's interpretation of the circular economy. So this is just a bit of a process diagram looking at how all of these definitions are coming together. And what that resulted in is what we call the 7 key elements of the circular economy. So prioritize regenerative resources, design for the future, preserve and extend what's already being made, rethink business models, use waste as a resource, collaborate to create joint value, and incorporate digital technology. I'd like to just go through examples for each one. I'm sure you guys are already familiar, but hopefully I can also answer any questions you have by the end. And I hope these examples are also quite new and inspiring for the audience. So, obviously renewable energy, it's kind of a no-brainer. Fossil fuels cannot be a part of our future. Yeah, full stop. In the Netherlands, we have quite a good public transportation infrastructure, and also quite some good commitments to utilize renewable energy for public transportation. And there's a commitment by the NS, which is the National Transportation Agency, to convert all of their trains to wind energy across the country. So I think that's interesting, but also not so inspiring, kind of obvious. Another really good example, I think, is actually in the field of wastewater and the natural cycle. So there's a company called Vitens, which has some wastewater management processes, and what they do there is extract minerals and humic acid from the wastewater stream, concentrate that down, and put it into bottles, products, which can actually be used as a soil conditioner for agriculture. And I think it doesn't seem extremely inspiring, but I think if you also look at where a lot of the sort of real environmental impacts are happening, the emission, the leaching of nitrogen and phosphorus through agriculture specifically is one of the key problem areas for our planetary boundaries right now. It's actually one of the biggest transgressions of our planetary boundaries, and really looking at innovative solutions to stop that leaching is super critical. So, really nice example, although not the most sort of flashy, but really important to close that loop fundamentally. So preserving and extending what's already being made. I think this is actually, there are a lot of exciting things happening in this field. I know a lot's happening in the textile sector, which is quite exciting. We have a few repair cafes in the Netherlands. I've been to a few, and I've even participated in a few workshops to see how we can sort of extend the lifetime of products through also combining 3D printing and other technologies. So I think that there's a lot of interesting things happening here. And also, I think a great way to sort of pool the creativity and the innovative nature of people. Sort of people in the neighborhood, get them inspired and bring them together for a good cause. Another project that I actually worked on a couple of years ago was with the consumer electronics company Philips. I think about 2 years ago they split their company actually. One is on lighting and one is on healthcare. I was lucky enough to work with them before that split. So I actually worked with them on investigating the feasibility for repair and remanufacture and refurbishment of both a lot of their lighting systems and some of their healthcare systems. And I think this is actually a really exciting thing now, because we're not only investigating the sort of technical feasibility of, how do we repair or upgrade a light bulb, or in this case, a big heavy MRI machine. but also how do you kind of fundamentally redesign the whole logistics the whole logistics chain to accommodate for that. And also fundamentally what you get into is really looking at the business model there. So how can you also offer potentially MRI scans in this case to hospitals as a service rather than buying a multi-million euro machine. So again, I think this is a great example that I can also speak to from personal experience. It's really all about small steps, because once you begin to sort of crack open the idea of remanufacturing and refurbishing, you kind of automatically open up and begin to explore how you can work with your logistics partners, how you can begin to work with customers to offer new business models, and slowly, things do begin to change step by step. So I think this is actually a really inspiring example that I hope to see Philips really dive deep into, and there's a lot of good signs that they will. I just mentioned the textiles example, but using waste as a resource, textiles, there really is an obvious opportunity there. And just as a practical example, IKEA is doing some work to incorporate post-consumer textiles into their new lines. But I've also worked with a few fashion retailers out of the Netherlands, also looking at the kind of feasibility for taking post-consumer textiles and reincorporating that into new products, either through shredding and then reweaving, or for instance the sort of low quality pocket liners that you have in your jeans or pants or the inside of your jacket. I mean, these things are great places for using what would be deemed as waste as actually a resource and extending the life cycle that way. I knew only the name of this company, but I was privileged to meet the speaker, Rick Veenendaal, yesterday. He works for a company called Gispen in the Netherlands. And they actually do some really exciting stuff with office furniture. In the Netherlands, we have this, this sort of new model of working. It's called the new way of working, if I do the direct translation. What that means, though, is, well, what it actually looks like is a place more like this, where you have kind of a more flexible office structure. People aren't necessarily tied to their own desk, but kind of move around, work from home, that sort of thing. And what that means is that there's a whole kind of family of office furniture, such as these sort of ugly, almost 1980s plastic cabinets where you would keep files that are now almost completely irrelevant because everybody is working on a laptop. Paper doesn't really have much of a place in an office unless you're sort of sketching on it. So what they did is they actually kind of made this a design challenge, and they said, how can we sort of fundamentally reuse this furniture? And he went into great detail into not only how they did that, but also the sort of internal struggles on aligning the whole company to really redesign these things. And actually what they came up with was what I think is a great solution. That they're looking at actually quite different types of new products where you can have sort of a closed phone call booth or a sort of private office space or a standing workspace, which actually really fits in with how people work today. So I think this is a really great example of how you can, I wouldn't necessarily call it upcycling, but I think really creatively using what we already have and upgrading that into not only a very stylish and interesting product, but something that really actually fits within the culture today. So I think it's also a really good example of how circular economy can really kind of show that it's super relevant today. Yeah, so designing for the future, you know, there are so many good examples. I just wanted to show a couple here, but here, this is an example of headphones that are designed in a modular way. I find it super annoying. I've had a few mobile phones and a few pieces of electronics where just one component fails and you have to throw out the whole thing. And it's super annoying. But actually, this is a really inspiring example where you can actually just replace the components and potentially upgrade them. I think with this specific example, maybe you can't upgrade, but you can certainly replace the components, which is very nice. Also, a really nice Dutch example that I'm super interested in buying is the Fairphone. And their original mission actually was quite different. It was really founded on the idea of kind of breaking the cycle of conflict minerals and conflict mining, especially in Congo. But now with their Fairphone 2, what they've really sort of embraced a lot of circular economy principles and have designed this to be completely modular and completely upgradable. So it's very open for the consumer to crack open the phone and replace everything from the camera to the battery to your memory. All of these things can be upgraded to the screen as well, and I think that's really inspiring. And there's also a few other examples, I think, on the market today, and also, unfortunately, a few examples that were really promising in the concept phase from Google, and I managed to have some nice conversations with their project manager on that, but somehow that project stopped. But I think, you know, again, showing how the circular economy not only is sort of good for resource efficiency and for the environment, but actually can connect to people and connect to sort of modern values. This is a really great example because I would assume that a lot of us in this room and a lot of young people all over the world really like the idea of having a more interactive relationship with their products and being able to customize them. So I'm really happy to see these sort of things actually come onto the market now. This is a project I think still being developed in the Netherlands. It's called the Circular Valley, and the idea here is to not only accelerate circular businesses, but also to bring them together in such a way where you can realize symbiosis, real material symbiosis, in a physical area. And the nice thing about this is it's very close to Amsterdam, very close to the airport, and I think they're doing quite a good job on bringing in some initial companies, but also in a lot of their programming to engage with startups. And the idea here is really to put the concept of collaboration first. That being said, it's still in its early phase, but I'm very interested to track how this is going to play out in the future. Another Dutch example is a company called Dutch Awareness. So, just like I talked about with Fairphone, but also relevant to sort of any product on the market today, is looking back through the supply chain. It's actually very difficult to understand where anything is coming from, and I've helped companies do this type of analysis a couple of times. And of course, your sort of first tier supplier is what they call it. It's kind of easy enough. You can give them a phone call. If you ask them where they're getting their stuff, a bit more difficult, and you're looking at a few weeks to a few months of really researching where that stuff is coming from. And when you get into tier 3 and tier 4, and especially when you're talking about consumer electronics, there's so many, that there are thousands of components and subcomponents and materials. It's very, very difficult to really find out where your stuff is coming from and validate the sustainability performance of that. And this is one of the primary challenges that I think most product companies are struggling with now. And luckily, there are some good solutions that are coming to the market. This company, Dutch Awareness, actually makes work clothes, so it's a business-to-business company, but they do a lot of work really trying to make their supply chain transparent. So you can really see where the different materials are coming from, when and how they're coming together to make a single garment. I think this is, again, actually a pretty good example of a first step. I think this is sort of far from an ideal solution, to be perfectly honest. But now, I think what we see is the beginning of things like blockchain technology, which is a distributed ledger where you can really track with almost full transparency what's going on in the supply chain. And I think these sort of technologies are really going to revolutionize solutions for these kind of supply chain challenges. So also really good to keep in mind that there are some digital technologies that are really allowing us to take much bolder steps to address these challenges as we go on in the coming years. Rethinking the business model. I think actually this is the one where there's probably the most room to expand on, because you can really explore this in many different directions. I wanted to give one example here, which is a company called Bundles, which actually will lease household appliances instead of sell you them. And I think that's actually a great way, especially when dealing with the problem of energy efficiency distributed across households. One of the big problems that we have is not so much the level of technology. You can find very, very advanced, very sustainable technologies like washing machines and other home appliances. The problem is really getting them into every household across the country and eventually across the world. And I think actually this is a great solution whereby you can lease the best quality and not have to spend potentially thousands of euros to buy it. So you can access it for a much cheaper monthly cost and collectively reduce energy and other issues. There's a company called Aoping, which is also looking at the idea of leasing mattresses, and again, this is something tied back to the Gispen example with furniture. People don't really want to buy second-hand mattresses for maybe obvious reasons, but that doesn't mean that the materials have to go to waste. So actually having a leasing model for mattresses makes a lot of sense, because then you can connect to furniture makers or other companies that would be looking to use textiles that come from mattresses as an input into their production process. So I think while we're thinking about rethinking business models, these are some great ideas that not only are a nice idea for the company itself, but also really look to the whole sector and even for sort of cross-sectoral transformation potential and cooperation. So it's, again, a first step to much larger systems change. Incorporating digital technology, I think this is actually a place where, an example where there's really a ton of stuff happening, and just a really quick example. This company, Chloe, uses 3D scanning technology to sort of customize clothing. But I think also looking across, for instance, the whole mobility sector now, especially for younger people, we don't necessarily want to buy a car and have to pay for maintenance and clean it and whatever. We just want actually mobility services. So I think there's a world of stuff going on with digital technology, and I'd be happy to answer your questions, but just before that, our company has a digital platform that we call the Knowledge Hub, which has, I'm sure, actually much more than 500 case studies online. You can browse, you can see what's relevant, and I would encourage you to check it out on this website here. Thank you.
So Monica has a first question to Matthew. We do 1-2 questions quickly while I set up next slides.
So actually I'm going to ask, did anyone already get a question, what they would like to ask? As usual, so I'm always preparing my own questions. I already tested this yesterday on Christian as well, and I would like to see your answer. So most of the examples you showed here today, and most of the examples which are actually brought out, are always from the developed countries. Could you bring, because I know your background, you've been traveling quite a lot, can you bring good examples from the emerging countries? Or maybe even, I could relate to Soviet Union being very circular in a sense, so maybe from the history as well, good examples.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think last year I was very privileged to work with WWF to really sort of profile what was happening, all of the sustainability issues happening in the food system. And I think in this sense, when you look to emerging countries or developing countries, actually circular economy isn't necessarily a foreign concept for them. It's kind of ancient knowledge. It's just that, yeah, I mean, how to sort of put this in a clear way. The way that we've developed our society now is to be quite streamlined and quite efficient, and we do that by scale. So actually, even if you just look within sort of small farms all across Asia, all across the developing world, there's circular economy principles there because, frankly, these farmers need to invest in their soil, invest in their capital, their natural capital on their farm in order for their kids and their grandkids to have a career. In today's society here in the West, we don't do that. We just dump massive amounts of chemicals, and it worked for decades, and it's not working anymore. So I think it's I would actually say that we've made the mistake by departing from a lot of these sort of key principles that a lot of other people in the world have. And now we need to make quite a massive course correction because, of course, the impact of what we're doing in this sort of massive centralized system is really steering a lot of kind of key sustainability indicators off the charts across the world. We're having too much of an impact. So I think actually, in many ways, returning to these principles and giving the example of agriculture is exactly what we need right now. So
in a sense, scarcity could be bringing more circularity.
Yeah, I mean, one sort of principle that I've always kind of found useful is really thinking of Earth as a spaceship. I mean, we are a small dot sort of floating through space, and we need to act that way. I mean, like, we don't have infinite resources, and we have to behave in such a way that, we really do make the most. So I think that's kind of a principle that I've always found really useful. So.